As Steve has already introduced this morning, we're going to move on to, it would be the fifth blessing by Jacob to his 12 sons. And the subject in this morning's blessing is Zebulun, who's actually the sixth son of Leah and the 10th son of Jacob. So I know that's a little bit confusing. We'll get into that in just a minute. So we'll hit this and then we'll get started. So again, I know I've just put this slide up in here again this morning as reference. We know all this is to show you can't read it, but we're close to the end. The yellow means we're close to the end. And today, or last time we were together, we wrapped up the blessing to Judah. We looked at that over a few weeks because it's so, there's so much content in there and has so much bearing on our, on our faith and in Christ. Judah being a type of Christ in that sense, and Christ comes from the tribe of Judah, the kingly tribe. And what we summarized last time together was the Judah blessing summary. There's three parts to his blessing, and the first part being the beginnings. This is how I put it together, that from what we called, Jerry, I know you haven't been here, but we called a deficit framework characterized by all humanity comes one whose name is praise. Judah means praise. Remember the context of the birth of the first five sons, actually six sons. Leah, she is trying to win the approval of her husband. And she is doing that through giving birth to sons. Now my husband will love me. Now my husband will love me. And the background to this is Genesis chapter 30. You could read through there and see how she's trying, she feels second best. She plays second fiddle to Rachel. And she is trying to win the approval. Well, what I'm saying in that is that is the default mode of human nature, is to feel that we have to do something. We have to improve ourselves. We are less than, and we have to do things to overcome. That is the human condition. And the first six boys were born within that context. And we've looked at all that. But out of that deficit framework, all of a sudden Leah's attitude changes, and she names Judah praise, which something switched in her head. Something switched for her to move out of that deficit framework. We don't know what that is, because now what we're going to see in Zebulun, she switched back again. And we'll see that in just a little bit. And then he emerged. He rises up. He takes the role. Reuben was the firstborn, but Reuben lost his position and his within the family of the firstborn, and actually Judah emerges. And remember that text that I've read that is so meaningful to me, the day the lion roared. When standing in the court of Joseph, Judah speaks up and says, I'll take his place. Oh, it's just so powerful. Oh, that's so powerful. And then the last of destiny is that in that blessing of Jacob to his son, there's words in verses 10 through 12 of his leadership role and to restore peace and great abundance to all of the family. And of course, we just have to connect that to and tie that to what Christ has done as a future fulfillment of Judah's role, bringing blessing to all the nations. So that's what we've talked about. Now, moving on today, in verse 13, the text reads, Zebulun will dwell at the seashore. And note, I've spelled it Zebul UN. There's a discrepancy in spelling. It can be spelled O-N, but I've just chosen to stay consistent with this. This is correct. Zebulun will dwell at the seashore. He shall be a haven for ships, Steve, just like you said. And his flank shall be towards Sidon. Boy, this is enigmatic language. What is he talking about here? But what is it about this blessing? Are there any observations that you have? Maybe not in just anything. In your first reading, what do you notice about this blessing as compared to what we've talked about already? Any comments?
I'm not sure that I can remember all the others, but this, I would call this succinct as opposed to
good
many
succinct.
Others.
Yeah, true.
And a word that I have learned to watch for and appreciate is the word dwell, because it's a word that we don't use so much today, but it has a connotation of being placed or sent or going somewhere and staying there.
Huh.
Not giving up, not pulling up roots, but to dwell.
Oh, to dwell, right here.
Right.
Okay, yeah, good. Those are great observations, yeah, for first reading. What I saw, of course I've had a little bit of a head start, was it's positive. It's positive. Remember the blessings we've seen in the past, and that would be true, not with Judah, but some of them have been mixed. I mean, some of them we had to get, we would actually call them in some regard a curse. I mean, they sound like curses is what they are, but we've kind of worked through that language a little bit. I'm just really resistant to the idea of a father cursing his son, so we got that on hold, and I don't think that is the case. But in this case, it is. It's positive. It's not fantastic. It's not visionary in the sense of doing great things like Judah, but it is. I mean, it's just right here, and it's very succinct and very to the point. Although the language is enigmatic, we go, gee, what does all this mean? And we'll look at that. 3 phrases, and we'll go on and look at that in just a little bit. Now, first thing I want to do is go back to the birth context, because this tells us we've been doing this every time. So now we rewind back to Genesis 30, verse 20, and Zebulun's birth background. Then Leah said, God has endowed me with a good gift.
There's the dwell word again.
Now my husband will dwell with me. Isn't that interesting? What are your thoughts on that, Charlie?
That was a great observation from Dave, and I was looking for dwell. And there it is.
Yeah, I think so too. I hadn't made that correlation, but I think let's ponder that and see what we can come up with here. My husband will dwell with me because, why? Because I have now borne him 6 sons. Now, the blessings, remember, we're in a hospice setting. Jacob is on his deathbed. He's in the hospice bed. All of his sons are around him, and he's going through each one, and in order, to some degree, they have been in birth order up to this point. We've done 4 sons. We did Reuben, firstborn, Simeon, Levi, then Judah, 4th son. And now he goes to Zebulun, who is actually the 6th son, not the 5th son. The 5th son is Issachar. But maybe it's just because he's next in order. I don't know. So he goes there and he says, I have borne him, or she says, I've borne him 6 sons, so she named him Zebulun. I'll get to that in a minute. Zebulun is the 10th son in birth order because there's other women in Jacob's life who are giving birth. And I won't go into all that because I don't have that given to memory. But the 6th son of Leah, the fifth son in this blessing order. Okay. So Zebulun. So she named him Zebulun. In doubt, it has the idea of dowry. The name. His name also has the idea of prince. Two different ideas. We won't dwell in that. But for some reason, she's connecting dowry. God has endowed me with a good gift. That's why she named him Zebulun, as a gift. A gift to her husband. So she could then in turn gain his love and approval. All right, moving on. We're going to now look at another text. I'm comparing over here Genesis 49:13, blessing of Jacob to Zebulun, versus, compared to Deuteronomy 33, and this is 400 to 500 years later. This is the blessing of Jacob to now the 12 tribes as they're waiting on the other side of Jordan, on the other side of the Jordan River, ready to move in to the promised land. He blesses all of the tribes. And here is his blessing to the tribe of Zebulun. Let's compare. Because it's prophetic in nature, right? So what is true of the person Zebulun? Let's now look at how can that correlate to what is true about the tribe of Zebulun. Blessing of Moses. Of Zebulun he said, rejoice, Zebulun, in your going forth, okay, and Issachar in your tents. He ties the two together, brothers 5 and 6, Issachar and Zebulun. We're going to look at this in just a moment. They will call peoples to the mountain. They will be working jointly in some regard, calling peoples to what mountains? They will offer righteous sacrifices. So there's some aspect of a renewal here in thought, of righteous of a dedication to God. They will draw out abundance of the seas and the hidden treasures of the sand. So there is now the sea reference again. Now this is 500 years later. Now let's do some correlation here. Here is 49:13. Here's Deuteronomy 33. I've drawn these parallels up. Dwell at the seashore. Okay, over here, draw out abundance from the sea and sand. Haven for ships. Again, the nautical reference. The Sidon reference, where he says, Sidon shall be at your flank. And we're going to look at a map in a minute to the location of Sidon, and we'll comment on that. But then we've got these added, a calling to the mountains and the righteous sacrifices. Well, if we were to look yet ahead, and yet again at probably another 1,000 years ahead, this would be around 400, not 400 BC. This is 1500. The time of Hezekiah would be around the fall, 6th century BC, another 1,000 years here. We see that at the time of Hezekiah, he calls the people back to God, and he calls on representation from all of the tribes, and Zebulun responds. Those from the tribe of Zebulun respond to help restore the Passover feast within Jerusalem. And that is, this is the text that says, and the men of Zebulun responded, and they had a significant role within that. So I'm tying that to this, at this time, prophetic utterance of what would happen yet 1,000 years later, and I think this could be a fulfillment of that in 2 Chronicles 30, 10 through 23. And again, drawing out abundance from the sea, in my mind, that goes to commerce. Oh, I forgot this. Calling to the mountains. Calling to the mountain in Jerusalem. Calling people back to God is how I'm seeing that. Righteous sacrifices. So you know, we're drilling down in, we're looking at the original blessing of Jacob to Zebulun. We're looking at the birth context of what was happening in the family at the time. We're looking at how could this blessing of Jacob be fulfilled in a prophetic sense. So we fast forwarded ahead to the blessing of Moses, and then we look yet further ahead to the time of Hezekiah, which would have been about 1,000 years ahead, to how some of these words here could have been fulfilled in that context. So we're looking at a lot of different things, a lot of information, and not very much in depth. But now let's drill in and let's look at these guys and where their allocation in the land of Israel. Once they settled at the time right after Moses, 500 years after the blessing of 500 years after the blessing of Jacob, they're settled right here. Can you see that better now? Okay, this is in northern Israel. Jerusalem would be down here, way down in here, in the allocations of Benjamin. This area up here is what's called the Jezreel Valley. It'd be Galilee. And notice it's not on the sea. And again, Zebulun and Issachar are right together. Nazareth is over here. Big valley right here called the Valley of Jezreel, and you guys know that valley as in the Greek Armageddon. So that's where it's a big fertile valley with mountains surrounding them. It's kind of a plateau that sits between these range of mountains. This is called the Carmel Ridge right here. The city of Haifa is right here, and that Haifa is the major port in Israel. If you go into Haifa, it's very mountainous. The mountain goes right down to the port, and it is really look. Notice how flat it is along here. It's the only natural port of any degree along the coast here. Sidon is off the map, but you have Tyre and Sidon, and it's actually right at the tip up here. And I think that reference to Sidon has to do with the expanse. It has to do with the expanse of their role. Sidon would represent, the northern expanse of this role, and I would say this role has to do with commerce. They are working together. Issachar, Zebulun are working together to pull things, haven for ships, pulling things out of the ocean, and transporting those things in my mind. Now, this is how it fits. You're going, geez, where is he going with this? Well, let me show you. It just so happens that this area right here, Zebulun and Issachar, is on the most traveled road in all of the world in ancient times. It's called the Via Maris, the Way of the Sea. The two connecting terminuses would be the Mesopotamia, which is the seat of civilization, and Egypt. And this was the way. This would be Interstate 25 on steroids. This would be not 2 lanes, not 3 lanes. This is probably a 10-lane freeway, okay, as comparison. Be something you'd see, maybe I-5 going through Los Angeles would be a good comparison of, and their allocation is right on the Via Maris. Okay, they are located right on there. Well, that is where commerce, that's where movement is happening. And so opportunity, that represents opportunity to be involved in commerce. And so what do you have to sell? We have things, we sell items from the sea. Well, it just so happens that the main route out to the sea is right here, called the Wadi Ara, and I believe there's a highway that runs right here from Megiddo. Megiddo was a very critical strategic spot in ancient times because right here, this valley, it's a narrow valley. I mean, I could picture it like today, going into this valley, and there's mountain range on both sides, and it's the only way out. It's the only way out to the ocean. And oh, wait, I guess I thought my projector went out, but I see the light. So, could it be that these guys, haven of ships here, commerce, this is the route, and they had a shipping business. Could it be? And I think that's what this is pointing to. So what can we observe? Zebulun was born within the same deficit framework as the first three sons. We see that as an observation. Although he's not impacted like his brother Judah, unlike the first three, Reuben, Simeon, and Levi, who were dramatically impacted, always trying to measure up. We saw that later on in life. Jacob's words to his son are positive in that he had no great error to reconcile. This was different than the first three. The blessing, when compared with Deuteronomy 33:18, seems to allude to a tribal tradition of sea-related commerce. Okay, they've got a connection with the sea at the port of Haifa. They're on the Via Maris. It only makes sense that they had and I think they were in business together. I think that that's my opinion. What can we derive? Zebulun appears to be a man who, like most of us, born into a less than perfect family. There you go. He blended in and followed along as a youth. No great stories. There's no stories of Zebulun standing out in the tribal movement of the family. He seemed to have a close relationship with his brother Issachar, who later appears to play the leading role within their relationship. We didn't really talk about that. The two brothers could have developed a shipping business together. That's from my head. It only makes sense. Next slide. Much later, during the time of King Hezekiah, the men of Zebulun responded to the king's call and contributed in a significant way to help restore Passover in Jerusalem, 2 Chronicles 30, 10 through 12. So their ancestors acted nobly as a tribe. Again, this is all wrapped up in this prophetic utterance of his son. So, summary comments. Zebulun, like many of us, did not have a Zebulun, like many of us, not all of us, did not have a predominant voice within his family, not like Judah. His father's words allude to a future in sea-related commerce, which appears to have occurred as supported from Deuteronomy 33. Centuries later, when King Hezekiah made the call to return to the Lord, the men of Zebulun played a significant role. The name Zebulun is somewhat connected to the Hebrew word for prince. Could it be, could it be Zebulun is a prince in the sense that he carried out his call in and through business. Could it be?
Sure could.
Sure it could. You know, I think where I'm kind of snickering here is that we want to read these texts like, oh, he played this religious role, this role, this great role in the Jewish religious tradition, but there's no indication of that. And this blessing from his father, I'm saying that it could very well be a blessing of business. And that he quietly carried out his role. He was gifted. He was endorsed by his father. And he and his brother worked together to actually develop something of value to themselves and to the nation as a whole, to the whole area of commerce. He played his role, no more, no less, that God gave to him. In this way, Zebulun is like you and I. This role was recognized and blessed by his father. Years later, when the king called for a return of the heart, Zebulun's descendants stepped up to help restore righteousness within the nation. So a regular guy who was never a standout, but his father spoke words of blessing, and he took those words and took the gifting that God had given him and developed something of value in the name of righteousness, so that his descendants later on, years and later, stood for what was right in a quiet, unassuming way, not in a leadership. Yeah, they took leadership in a quiet way, but that's what I have for Zebulun. Yes.